to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for tuning into the Construction Big Breakfast. I will be your host, Aidan Baun, and today we're going to be diving into a topic on modified wood in the built environment. Joining me today is our special guest, George Neel. Welcome to our podcast, George.
Thanks very much, Aidan. Good to be here.
Could you give us a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, of course. So my background is not in modified wood. You'd be surprised to hear. My background is in sales and marketing, more in sort of FMCG companies. So I worked at L'Oreal, and then after that, selling makeup essentially. Because I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. And after a few years, I moved to Diageo, selling drink, and worked on some fantastic brands. Johnny Walker, I think you mentioned you spent some time in Edinburgh, and some really cool, iconic brands like Guinness and Johnny Walker and Bailey's and Smirnoff, and got to sort of run the Smirnoff brand from a shop and marketing point of view across Europe, and got involved with some really cool sort of activations and getting kind of people to sort of reappraise Smirnoff, which had become a bit kind of commoditized. I'm sure you can relate to that. And after doing a whole load of sort of European and global roles, I moved a couple of years ago to Accsys Technologies, which is the parent company to a couple of brands which I'd love to talk to you about, Accoya and Tricoya. So that's my potted history in a nutshell.
Very good. Well, look, thanks for joining us. We always start with one question on the Construction Big Breakfast, and that is, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Yeah, I feel I could have done a bit better on this. I grabbed a black Americano and a small orange juice from a well-known coffee chain on the Strands. I'm going to try and do better for lunch.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, I stuck to my Scottish heritage and had porridge, blueberries.
With salt or no salt?
No salt. Okay. No salt, and all milk. No
okay.
water.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Very authentic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
The true stuff. So, look, let's get into it. Accsys Technologies. Do you want to just talk us through what's going on there?
Yeah, of course. It's probably fair to say it's not a company that a huge amount of people have heard of, and that's really because we produce products that are ingredient products. And I guess the best way of describing it is a little bit like Intel Pentium processors or Gore-Tex. They didn't necessarily produce the final product. They were an integral part of another product. And at Accsys Technologies, it's the same kind of thing. So we've got two products, both that sit within what we call the modified wood category. Yeah. And I'll come on to explain a little bit more about what that means. But essentially we've got two brands. The first is Accoya, and that's a solid wood brand. Okay. And then we've got Tricoya, which is an MDF wood brand, but with all the same sort of characteristics and features and benefits that Accoya has. Okay. So, as I said, this sits within modified wood, which I feel I'm throwing a lot of jargon at you in the first few minutes of this podcast. But modified wood is a new sort of subcategory or category, if you like, within the sort of the timber industry. And I guess we used to kind of consider, soft wood and hard wood. We had pressure treated wood, and we had all sorts of things. And in the last few years, there has been this new category called modified wood. And what that really means, as the name suggests, is you take natural wood and you perform a kind of modification process to it, which both enhances the kind of characteristics such as durability and hardness and a whole load of other, really good benefits to make it, much more commercial and utilising it for sort of many more kind of applications than you would typically be able to use standard wood. So that's kind of where we sit and what Accsys does. And the reason we're called Accsys Technologies, is because this is a a really innovative technology. Accsys Technologies is the only company in the world with this technology. It's heavily protected with IP.
Yeah.
And we are doing something that produces, we would argue, the most ultra high performance and the most sustainable wood brand in the world.
Yeah.
So yes, that's who we are.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of, let's say, building products companies out there trying to reduce their impact, whereas Accsys is very much on the other side of the scale where it's actually helping.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. I think with the whole focus on sustainability in companies around the world, you know, in the race for getting to carbon neutral, net zero, companies are really thinking about how they can sort of mitigate their effects that they're having on the planet, reducing kind of embodied carbon in their products, etc. And at Accsys, we are in a really unique position where the more we grow, the more wood we sell, the greater the net benefit we're having on the planet.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is we're substituting other materials such as aluminium or plastic or steel or concrete or unsustainable tropical hardwoods that have taken over 100 years to grow, and we're substituting with Accoya, for example, which has taken 20 years to grow and has a warranty of 50 years, but in reality will last between 60 to 100 years. So suddenly we are, you know, completely changing the dynamic because we are locking away all of this sequestered carbon in our products for decades. So that's the kind of sustainability angle, but it doesn't come at the expense of also being super high performance as well. So that's the kind of the sweet spot that we play in.
Yeah. And I noticed a lot of the sourcing of the raw materials coming from New Zealand.
That's absolutely right. And I feel like whenever this is mentioned, I have to kind of explain it because I think on the face of it, you might say, well, you know, there are forests in Scandinavia, there are forests in Scotland. Why do you choose to source your wood from New Zealand and then produce the product in the Netherlands, which is where our facilities is? Because on the face of it, that's a very long journey to take wood from one side of the world to the other. The rationale for doing this is because in New Zealand, they have the perfect climate for growing a species of pine called radiata pine. And because the climate is such, it's slightly kind of warmer and more temperate than, let's say, Northern Europe. The speed in which these trees grow is almost twice as fast as you would get in Northern Europe. So, as I said, our trees take about 20 to 25 years to grow.
Yeah.
In Scotland or sort of Scandinavia, they would typically take between 40, 45 years to grow.
Yeah.
And what that means is you can sequester a lot more carbon much more quickly. And actually, a little known fact is that when trees reach maturity, they stop actually sequestering carbon. I didn't know this until I joined Accsys. So actually the best thing you can do if you want to sequester carbon is let a tree reach maturity, cut it down, plant some more trees in its place, which will then continue to sequester carbon. And then the carbon that you've got locked away in, you know, our wood is then turned into a finished product, which can, as I say, lock it away for years to come. So New Zealand is the perfect place to grow the trees, very high yield, very fast growing. And actually the other kind of misconception is that sea transport is particularly bad, but if you work it out per cubic metre, it's considerably less than if you were to transport it by truck from Scandinavia. So you'll be familiar with terms like LCAs, like life cycle assessments, or EPDs, environmental product declarations. You know, we can really demonstrate the really low carbon impact of our products. And actually in some certain cases, our products are proven to have a carbon negative approval over the full sort of life cycle of their product, which is a great position to be in.
I also think, you know, when you talk about timber, I've worked with kind of street furniture suppliers before, and a lot of that is tropical hardwood.
Yes.
Right. And there's a lot of ambiguity about where that timber has come from and how it's been harvested and all of that kind of stuff. So the fact that it is coming from New Zealand, there's probably certain regulations in place in New Zealand that you trust the process and it's been harvested properly and the workers are looked after and all that kind of thing.
I mean, you've got it in one. I mean, I should have said at the start that all the wood that is made into Accoya is 100% FSC certified. What that means is we can be really certain, along the full supply chain of the product. And as you say, New Zealand being a very developed nation, we can also make sure that the workers' rights, etc., are protected in a way that, if you source tropical hardwoods, the likes of sapele, Moranti, Iroko, a lot of it coming from African nations where it's harder to guarantee that the wood has been, sourced in a legal and sustainable way.
Yeah, interesting. And looking at the types of projects that you work on, this is serious engineering, because you've got projects in places like Banff, where it's minus 30 degrees in the winter and then 30 degrees in the summer. In the Alps, this is...
Yes, I mean, this is the sort of real selling point. I mean, even if you put sustainability to one side, we could have a separate sort of chat just about the performance, really, because what the modification process does to both Accoya and Tricoya is that first of all, it makes it incredibly durable, really resistant to rot, which is one of the main pitfalls of working with wood, as you know. But the other point is that it makes it incredibly dimensionally stable. So we're all familiar with the sort of the shrink swell process with wood, which means that it can be very hard to sort of work with, and joiners and manufacturers have massive problems with that. Accoya is incredibly dimensionally stable, which also means that if you choose to coat it with a paint finish, they last up to 3 times longer than standard wood, because you don't put the same sort of stress on the paintwork. So it's used from Australia to the very northern parts of Norway. Whatever the climate. I mean, it's even used in oyster beds in the sea. So the application for Accoya is completely changing the perception of how you can use wood.
Yeah.
And that's what's so exciting with this product. In the past you would have thought, no, you have to make this out of steel, or you'd have to use concrete. And actually now architects and specifiers are being able to go, no, this is actually a really high performance wood that also happens to be really sustainable. Yeah. And we can use these in lots of new applications that wood was never previously considered.
Yeah, okay. And what sort of applications are we talking about, just for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, there are some pretty big applications. I should start by saying, 30% of wooden windows and doors in the UK are now made from Accoya.
Wow. Just
to put it in that context. Yeah. But we're sold all over the world. I mean, we, as I say, don't make a finished product. We sell to a distributor. A distributor sells to a manufacturer or a joiner, and then they will sell to the end customer or consumer. Yeah. So we are at the very start of the chain, but our products are sold all over the place, and there's some really high profile projects, and there's one I'm probably not allowed to refer to, but it's a big landmark in Rome. It's sort of circular. And they used to do a lot of fighting in there. So I'm going to leave it at that. The floor is being redone, and I think at the moment at least, Accoya is in spec to be the material of choice to replace the floor.
So if you're an architect or a specifier, that they're able to specify that early doors, and then that kind of the route to market is then that there's a supplier on the other side.
That's exactly it. Yes, I mean, we've got suppliers in most markets around the world. One of our big problems up to this point has been that demand has vastly outstripped supply. So we have been sold out essentially for the last few years, which has been a difficult position to be in, because ultimately we want to sort of delight our distributors and manufacturers and end consumers. On the other hand, it's fantastic to be in such high demand, and because of that, we are in the process of building out extra capacity, both in our plants in the Netherlands in Arnhem, but we're also underway putting the finishing touches to a plant to produce Tricoya up in Hull in the UK, and we have a JV with Eastman Chemicals, which is huge big sort of chemical company in the US, where we are planning to build an Accoya plant in Tennessee. So we've got huge amounts of capacity on the way. Until then, I guess my job as marketing director is made slightly easier by the fact that we are really constrained by the amount of product we can make.
Yeah, interesting. And so let's talk about the company as a whole. What's the trickle down effect within the organisation of working for obviously you've worked in different sectors before.
Yeah.
So when you join a very sustainability led organisation, what does that feel like to the employees?
I mean, it's a very different sort of feeling to working for a big company like, I guess, L'Oréal or Diageo, where I worked before. Part of my role when I first joined was actually looking at, our values, our purpose as an organisation. And actually, Accsys Technology's purpose is changing wood to change the world, which might sound a little bit kind of grandiose, but we are physically changing wood, and that wood is physically having a positive impact in changing the world. So that's what we stand for, and our values are about sort of ambition, respect, and commitments.
Yeah.
And what I would say is, although Accsys is not a new company, it has retained the culture and sort of feeling of a kind of startup company, because we feel that we're still so much at the beginning of our journey in terms of what we can do.
Yeah.
It's a very entrepreneurial culture.
Yeah.
It's a very small company in many senses. We're only about 250 odd people, and because we have a kind of distribution model, we don't have enormous sales forces like you might have in other companies. It's our distributors and our manufacturers who are essentially selling on our behalf.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is train up those distributors and manufacturers so they are selling our product in the right way and advocating us in a really positive light. But we're a pretty lean organisation, and that said, we are growing rapidly. So it's a very exciting time as we kind of mature as a business.
And how do you train up these suppliers of yours? That can't be an easy job.
No, I mean, our sales team, we call them a kind of technical sales team, because most of the team are actually ex-joiners, or they've all worked in the trades. So I think when you're going to train up a joinery company or a big manufacturer that makes sort of 25,000 windows a day, you've got to have a degree of credibility. It's no point me turning up and telling them how to do it. You need somebody who's actually worked with wood, has got years of experience, and that's why we have a really amazing team of ex-trade, technical sales guys who can troubleshoot if there's an issue. They can show you the best ways to get the best results from Accoya and Accoya, and through that we have really good relationships with the big distributors and this whole network of what we call approved manufacturers. Because we don't want to send consumers to anybody. We want to make sure that if you order an Accoya window, which, let's be honest, is an investment, you're going to hope that this sees you out. You want to make sure that you are working with a manufacturer or a joiner that has been suitably trained through the Accoya process. And so you can go to the Accoya.com website, you can go to the where to buy icon, and then you can look for approved manufacturers kind of near you. And in turn, we send them leads. So it's a very kind of reciprocal process where we create business for them, but we have the assurance that our consumers are only working with the best manufacturers out there.
And they go through the sort of process to become an approved.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a whole sort of criteria of what they need to meet in order to achieve approved manufacturer status. And part of that is some really sort of intricate training with our technical sales team, and only when the sales team feel that they have reached a certain level and they are competent to work with Accoya, as well as a whole load of other things, at that point we list them on our website. They have their own profile. They feature Accoya on their website, and it's that, as I said, that sort of symbiotic relationship where we help them and they help us.
Interesting, very good. And one thing I'd just like to pick up on as well is Accsys is obviously quite a profitable company, and sometimes it can be seen that you have to sacrifice profit in order to be sustainable, but Accsys has managed to find this kind of happy place where you've got the technology, you're running a sustainable company, but it's also profitable with you being listed as shareholders, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the journey to this point hasn't been, plain sailing, and actually last year was the first year as a business that we were actually profitable.
Right.
And that's a fantastic place to be in, and it really sets us well up for the future. And off the back of that, we are able to do a whole load of other things that we just haven't been able to do in the past, such as we've got a charities committee, and we're working with now 3 charities, one in the UK, one in the Netherlands, and one at a kind of global level. All of these types of activities that really fit with our kind of company ethos and culture, but we just haven't been able to do because we haven't been profitable.
Yeah.
So I really feel that this year is a kind of real transitional year for us as a business. And yes, we are now at that point where we are profitable. And as I said, the more wood we can sell, the more impact we can have. And as I said, we've got really big plans for the future. So yeah, watch your space.
Good. So what with COP26 coming up? 26? COP26?
Yeah, 26. Yeah.
Yeah, 21. Coming up, are you looking to be involved in that in any way, or?
Yeah, we're certainly trying to get out there and start talking about this in a way that we haven't really done in the past. I mean, last year we produced our inaugural sustainability report. We're in the process of really embedding a kind of ESG strategy, environmental social governance strategy, which is not something that we've had before.
Yeah.
And we're really trying to engage in much more kind of thought leadership in terms of the subjects. And so we are trying to get much more involved, certainly around the kind of the fringe elements of COP26. And yeah, we've got a few things in store that I can't talk about today, but we'll be sharing quite soon in terms of what we're planning to do around that event. But yes, I mean, it's great that such a high-profile event is going to be in the UK.
Yeah. And
I think the UK government sort of slightly belatedly woken up to the fact that this is going to be a really important thing for us, and if we can kind of garner governments around the world to kind of wake up and understand the climate emergency. And I think I don't use that term loosely. There was something called the ICPP report launched a few weeks ago, which really kind of spelled out the sort of the danger that we're in for the planet. And unless we can halve carbon emissions by 2030 and get to net zero by 2050, we're going to be in a really bad place. Yeah. But on the flip side, if we can do that, we can start to bring down temperatures and actually have quite a positive future. So there's a real tipping point. And even Accsys, that has a sustainable product proposition, we're looking at our whole kind of holistic business operations to make sure that we're not just selling a sustainable product, but the way we do business and the way we manufacture our products is as sustainable as it can be.
Yeah, and that's so important. We globally need companies like Accsys, and there's huge opportunities for sustainable companies, particularly in the building products sector, to really grab hold of it and take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two industries that often kind of get singled out is sort of fashion and building materials. And I've got a sister who's a fashion designer, so I've heard some of the horror stories that exist in that industry as well. I mean, what was the stat I heard the other day about the building industry? I think if cement was a nation, it would be the third highest emitting nation in the world, which really puts into context why we do need to sort of look at different materials. And this whole kind of thing about sort of building back better, okay, it's a bit of a government slogan, but I think it has got real merit in terms of what it means, which is, we do have the chance to completely, redefine how we build buildings, whether residential or commercial. And I think the most responsible businesses, and Accsys is being specified in some really high-profile businesses here in London, when they come to building offices, etc., because they realise that actually consumers more and more are really kind of voting, with their dollar.
Yeah.
And actually, if they see businesses saying one thing but then building offices or whatever out of really unsustainable building materials, it just doesn't stack up. And I think, we're in this age where greenwashing and hypocrisy is going to be called out for what it is.
Absolutely.
And I'm pleased that this is happening, because I think too many companies are getting away with saying one thing and doing a complete other.
Yeah. Well, look, on that note, George, I'd like to thank you for joining us and keep doing all the great work that you're doing.
No, thanks for having me, and sorry if I was preaching a little bit, but it was great great to share my thoughts with you and discuss, Accsys and Accoya and Tricor. I feel like we could have spoken for a lot longer.
Yeah. So, for all the architects and engineers and anyone else who might want to specify or know a little bit more about Accsys, where can they find you?
First of all, go to accoya.com. We do a lot of CPDs with architects, both in person and online, and we're developing out the website to create a special area just for architects. But the best place to go in the kind of the immediate term is accoya.com.
Okay.
All the information's there, including things like LCA and EPD data. So if there's any sort of information you need, head to the website.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you to all our listeners today. Thank you for tuning in. Hope that you enjoyed this and maybe took a few new facts and figures away. Now, we have a new episode of the Construction Big Breakfast every single week now. It used to be every 2, but we're now on every single week. So if you want to hear more, please hit the subscribe button and give us a follow. And make sure you give us a 5-star review as well if you did enjoy the episode today. Now, if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast in future, please let us know at www.inventt.com. The link is in the description, and just fill out the form, and we will see you next time.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.inventt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.inventt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.